Everyone in the office swore they heard the sound of a life collapsing that morning. Some said it was a folder slamming, others said it was a breath being ripped out of a man's chest. But those closest to the scene whispered that it wasn't a sound at all, it was the look in a single dad's eyes when he realized the job he depended on to feed his son had been snatched away in seconds for something he didn't do. The day began like every other chaotic weekday for Daniel Reeves, 35 years old, full-time customer service supervisor, full-time single father, and part-time master juggler of a life that somehow insisted on throwing him flaming swords when he was barely equipped to hold spoons. At 5:12 a.m., his phone alarm buzzed with its usual cracked speaker rattle, a sound so familiar that even his half-asleep mind could identify it before his eyes opened. The apartment was still dark, the kind of dark that made the world seem unfairly asleep while he had to be awake, shuffling across cold tiles to switch on the kettle and begin another routine of responsibility. His son, 8-year-old Leo, slept curled like a comma beneath a dinosaur comforter, and Daniel paused for a second in the doorway just to take in the sight, because watching his son sleep was the one reminder that despite the bills, the overworked hours, the exhaustion, and the loneliness, something in his life was still soft and worth protecting. Breakfast was the usual assembly line chaos: toast, eggs, a small spill, "Dad, I can't find my socks," a missing homework sheet that magically reappeared under a chair. By 6:30 a.m., Daniel's shirt already had a tiny stain and his nerves were halfway worn, but he managed, because single dads don't get the privilege of saying, "I can't today." The bus ride was a cramped 23 minutes, where Leo leaned into his side, head on his arm, and asked, "Dad, you'll be at my game this Saturday, right?" Daniel swallowed. His shift schedule had him working, but he vowed, "I'll make it, buddy. I promise." After dropping Leo at school, Daniel rushed to Metrotech Solutions, the company where he'd worked for 7 years, the place where he had built his reputation as dependable, honest, and hardworking. Yet that morning, something felt off, the kind of off you can sense before anyone says a word, when you walk into a room and feel invisible tension squeezing the air. People avoided eye contact. His coworkers whispered, glancing toward him then snapping their heads away. His best office friend, Jenna, mouthed, "Be careful," without being able to say more. Daniel barely had time to ask what was happening before he was summoned to the director's office. "Sit, mister," Caldwell demanded, voice sharp as if he'd been rehearsing anger. On the desk lay printed pages, emails Daniel had supposedly sent to a major client filled with rude, unprofessional comments. Daniel blinked, confused, reading lines he had never typed. "This isn't me," he insisted. "Someone tampered with," but Caldwell cut him off. "We traced the messages to your login." Daniel's stomach crashed. "Sir, I didn't write those. I swear on my son." Caldwell didn't even flinch. "You know the policy. Zero tolerance. Effective immediately, you're terminated." It felt unreal, like someone had unplugged gravity. Fired. Just like that. Without an investigation. Without a second of trust after 7 loyal years. Security escorted him out with a cardboard box containing a stapler, 2 pens, a coffee mug Leo painted in 1st grade, and the last shreds of dignity he had left. Outside, he sat on the curb, staring into the traffic rushing past as if the world didn't care that his had just caved in. What would he tell Leo? How would he pay rent? His breathing became shaky, too fast, too uneven. Then, through the noise, his phone buzzed, a message from the school. Leo forgot his lunchbox. "Can you drop something off?" Daniel wiped his face, stood, and walked. Because no matter how broken a person felt, parenthood didn't pause. By noon, he had dropped off food, waited for Leo to finish smiling at him through the cafeteria window, and stepped back outside, unsure where to go next. He couldn't go home yet, not to that silence, not to that crushing realization. So he walked through the city, past office buildings where other people were still employed, past cafes he couldn't afford today, past job ads that didn't pay enough. Hours blurred until late afternoon when he finally went home and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. At 4:03 p.m., the front door swung open and Leo burst inside, waving a drawing in his hand. "Dad, look. My teacher said I'm getting better." Daniel forced a smile even though his insides were shredded. "That's amazing, buddy. And guess what? I told my friends you're coming to my game this Saturday. Daniel froze. The promise he made. The shift he couldn't take now, because he didn't even have a job anymore. Leo sat beside him, head on his shoulder. You okay, Dad? Yeah, Daniel lied gently. After dinner, after homework, after bedtime stories, Daniel watched his sleeping son again. Only this time, the peaceful sight didn't comfort him, it scared him. He had no backup plan. No savings. No safety net. By midnight, his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. Meet me at Café Aspen tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's urgent. Daniel almost ignored it, until the next line appeared. It's about why you were fired. He sat up, heart pounding. Someone knew something. Someone wanted to talk. And for the first time that day, a tiny spark, thin as a thread, pulled him upward from despair. By the time sunrise stretched across the city the next morning, Daniel had already rewritten every possible version of the meeting in his head, some hopeful, some terrifying, some so unbelievable he almost laughed in the dark kitchen while waiting for coffee to drip. But nothing he imagined came close to the truth waiting for him at Café Aspen, a truth that would flip his world again, this time in his favor, and prove that not all losses are endings, some are brutal doorways into justice. Café Aspen was busier than usual, filled with the morning rush of people who had the privilege of normal days ahead of them. Daniel entered wearing yesterday's exhaustion and a shirt that didn't quite match his trembling nerves. He sat at a corner table, clutching his phone like a life raft, when a familiar figure approached, Jenna, his coworker. The woman who had warned him silently. She slid into the seat across from him, eyes darting around as if afraid they were being watched. I'm sorry, she whispered before he even asked. I should have come yesterday, but I needed proof first. She pulled out her tablet and turned it toward him. On the screen were security logs, timestamps, and digital footprints belonging to someone who was not Daniel. It was Brad, she said, Daniel's rival at work, a man who had always looked at him with a mix of jealousy and resentment. He hacked your login and sent those emails to sabotage you. He wanted your supervisor position, and he pressured Caldwell to fire you before anyone could investigate. Daniel stared at the evidence, chest tightening with both relief and anger. Someone ruined his livelihood out of ambition. Why are you showing me this? He asked quietly. Jenna exhaled. Because you didn't deserve any of this. And because what happened next is complicated. As if on cue, the cafe door opened sharply, and in walked two men in suits, followed by, of all people, Mr. Caldwell. His eyes met Daniel's with a mixture of embarrassment and urgency. Caldwell hurried over. Daniel, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Daniel didn't stand. The director sat, clearing his throat with the discomfort of someone who had made a terrible mistake. I owe you an apology, he began. We reviewed our systems last night and discovered unauthorized access to your account. Daniel folded his arms. So you fired me without checking first. Caldwell winced. I regret that. Deeply. But the board wants you back. Immediately. It felt surreal. Yesterday, they escorted him out. Today, they came running. Why the sudden change of heart? Daniel asked. The answer was simple but shocking. Metrotech's most important client had received those fake emails and believed Daniel sent them. Furious, the client threatened to pull a multi-million-dollar contract. But late last night, the client reviewed older communications Daniel had handled, messages filled with professionalism, compassion, and solutions. They realized the abusive tone of the new emails didn't match his history. They demanded an investigation, one Metrotech could not refuse. When the truth surfaced, that Daniel had been framed, panic struck the management. They needed him back to retain the contract and restore stability. We want to offer your position back, Caldwell said. With a raise. And our sincere apologies. A raise. Apologies. A rush to fix their mistake. Daniel should have felt victorious. But something inside him hurt too much. You didn't listen, he said quietly. I begged you to believe me. I told you I didn't do it. Caldwell lowered his gaze. You're right. Jenna touched Daniel's arm. You should know, the client specifically asked for you. They said you're the only one they trust to manage their account after seeing how you handled their previous issues. Without you, the contract is gone. So that was it, they didn't want him back because they valued him as a person. They wanted him because he kept their profits afloat. But then Daniel thought of Leo. The bills, the rent, the upcoming soccer game. Swallowing his pride wasn't easy, but sometimes survival required it. "I'll return," he said slowly. "But under conditions." Caldwell looked relieved. "Of course. Name them." And Daniel did. 1. A formal written apology. 2. A cleared employment record. 3. A full investigation of Brad. 4. A schedule that allowed him Saturdays off, so he would never miss his son's games again. Caldwell agreed immediately, desperate to secure Daniel's return. Within 3 hours, Daniel was reinstated, this time with people watching him like a legend returning from exile. Coworkers approached with wide eyes, whispering congratulations. Some apologized. Some avoided him out of guilt. Brad, meanwhile, was escorted out by security, shouting about being framed himself, ironic, given he never expected his digital fingerprints to betray him. By lunchtime, Daniel sat at his old desk, touching the mug Leo painted, feeling a surreal sense of return. But something had fundamentally changed inside him. Respect had to be demanded, not begged for. And he wasn't the same quiet, invisible worker anymore. That evening, he picked up Leo from school. The boy ran toward him, leaping into his arms. "Dad, guess what? We practiced today and coach said I might be striker on Saturday." Daniel hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you, buddy. Will you be there?" Leo asked, eyes bright. Daniel smiled, this time without hesitation. "Yes. And from now on, every Saturday is ours." Leo grinned, the kind of grin that could repair any wound. That night, after dinner, after laughter, after a tickle fight that left both breathless, Daniel tucked Leo into bed and sat beside him. "Dad," Leo whispered sleepily. "Yeah, you look happier today." Daniel brushed his hair gently. "I am." When Leo finally drifted asleep, Daniel walked into the living room, stood by the window, and looked at the glowing city below. Yesterday, he thought he'd lost everything. Today, he realized he'd gained something bigger, his voice, his worth, his place, and somewhere deep inside, the world felt slightly fairer again.